shit! We slept in!
Oversleeping on the day we're filming an episode of Home Alone. How ironic.
Let's go! I hope we didn't leave anyone behind.
Hey, where is everyone? Happy holidays! Christmas is the favorite time of the year for many of us. I'm sure every one of us has a list of films that we rewatch every year in December. But my personal favorite always was and still is Home Alone, an amazing family film that no one believed in. Home Alone is one of the biggest box office hits of all time. $480 million of revenue with a budget of only 18. And on top of that, Home Alone will always remain the Christmas movie to watch, although only a few people believed in this project back in the late 80s. The film was created by writer and director John Hughes, the man behind major teen comedies of the 80s, 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. The idea for Home Alone franchise came to him while he was packing for a vacation. John decided to make a list of things he would need to take on the trip, and just in case, he added his children to the list. And thus, the inspiration for the McAllisters was born. What would my child do if I forgot him at home? Wondered Hughes. Hughes also thought, when home alone, what's the biggest fear a child has? Robbers, of course. Those simple thoughts led him to sit down and put together an 8-page treatment, which he later turned into a full script. This was the beginning of a simple and touching story about the making of one of the most classic Christmas films, Home Alone. Hughes was known in the industry for his fast pace and productivity. For example, one of his most iconic movies, The Breakfast Club, was written in just 2 days. And at the peak of his career, he was able to write a script every weekend. That's why after Hughes' death in 2009, many of his unreleased works remained. Hughes decided this time not to direct his own script, but instead to give the position to his friend, an aspiring director at the time, but already an established screenwriter, Chris Columbus. Back then, Chris Columbus's career was at risk. His last movie, Heartbreak Hotel, tanked, and he was convinced his career as a director was over. In later interviews, he stated multiple times that he owes his return to Hughes.
John was probably one of those people who had the most influence on my career, the other being Steven Spielberg. When I desperately needed a job as a director, John sent me the script of Home Alone for me to consider. John had faith in me at a time when not a lot of other people did. Home Alone completely changed the course of my life. I'll be forever grateful for him for that.
After a few edits, Chris and John decided that the script was ready, and it was time to pitch it to the studios. By the way, Columbus is the one who came up with the Old Man Marley plotline in the film, in order to add a bit of seriousness and make the ending more emotional. For funding, they turned to Warner Brothers studio chief, Bob Daly, who was immediately skeptical of the idea. He did not want to bet on a comedy that takes place in one location with a little sadistic child as the main protagonist. At that time, successful pictures invited stars such as Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone. They were the ones who brought in the cash. But Hughes convinced the studio that they wouldn't need much money and they should just shoot the film for just $10 million. Finally, Bob Daly gave in, and it was now time for casting. Casting director Janet Hershenson recalls that the main character was tailored specifically for the young Macaulay Culkin.
John had written Home Alone with Macaulay in mind because he just directed him in Uncle Buck. He was fabulous.
Regardless, Chris Columbus insisted on auditioning other children, as he felt it was only his duty as director. And you never know, maybe they would find someone even more charismatic. One of the criteria was that the child had to believe in Santa, and Culkin was both a talented lad and believed in Christmas magic, which made him an even better fit for the role. After actually meeting him, Columbus approved the boy for the role. Robert De Niro was offered to play one of the bandits, Harry, but he refused, considering that, at the time, the role was too childish for his career. Luckily, Joe Pesci, a no less charismatic actor, agreed, which led to many funny incidents on the set of Home Alone. The role of the second bandit was given to Daniel Stern, But there had been a misunderstanding. Originally, Stern was told that his scenes would take 6 weeks to film, but later the schedule was extended to 8 weeks. And due to budget constraints, producers were unable to pay for the additional 2 weeks, so Stern decided to leave the project. Daniel Roebuck was invited to take his place, but after 2 days of filming, Columbus fell into despair. He realized that Pesci and Roebuck had no chemistry, and he made the decision to return Stern.
Oh, I missed it. Why? Oh, because my pig-headedness. Thank God they came back to me.
When the lead cast members were selected, it was time for Chris to assemble the production team. And instead of hiring established professionals, Chris decided to turn to his friends from past projects who didn't have much experience in the industry. Julio Macat was hired as the cinematographer. He had no prior experience with large Hollywood productions. Macat was so worried that he wouldn't be able to perform his job that he spent all his free time rereading books about cinematography and rewatching old movies and cartoons looking for references. In the end, it paid off, and he did a fantastic job, especially when filming stunts using miniature cameras. Raja Gosnell became the lead editor. Chris knew him from the set of Heartbreak Hotel, which Chris directed. As you can see, the team was not the most reputable, but everyone strongly believed in the project. Everyone liked the script and the New Year's setting, and everyone was ready to punch a ticket to Hollywood. Next step was finding the house itself, because without the location chosen, none of the departments could start working. They found the right mansion near Chicago on 671 Lincoln Avenue in Winnetka Village.
The concept really was that the house would be warm and inviting.
This house becomes his tool to manipulate the bad guys.
The house, built in 1920, belonged to John and Cynthia Abenstein. During filming, which lasted 4 to 5 months, the family lived in the house. Their daughter, who was 6 years old at the time, recalls,
Macaulay Culkin actually used my room as his the place where he would go to study with his tutor.
The house seemed perfect, and everyone was happy, but there was one small problem. It was too cramped, and there was simply not enough room for the film crew and equipment. While trying to film test shots, the team literally fell out of the house due to the lack of space. At the time, there was no suitable studio available in Chicago, plus the budget wouldn't allow renting a large filming pavilion. They had to get creative. The team found a local abandoned school, which Hughes used earlier to shoot The Breakfast Club. They recreated the interior of the mansion in the gym. The scene with the flooded basement was entirely shot on set, which was built in the pool. The original mansion had a pretty simple design, so a more festive custom decor was added. The combination of red and green is present all over the film, and we, unknowingly but surely, filled with the magic of the holiday season throughout the entire tape. The creators even tried to completely recreate the atmosphere of the 50s noir by filming parts of the fictional film Angels with Filthy Souls. This is the real magic of color, which wasn't captured by any other director of the subsequent cheap TV and streaming service sequels of Home Alone. The set was built, but, as usual, solving one problem just made new ones appear. The film's budget increased from the declared $10 million to $14.7 million. The studio approved $12.5 million and not a cent more. In turn, the producers just thought, well, 14.7 is close enough. They went back to the studio and said that they need 14.7 million to make the project work. Warner listened, nodded, and then shut down the project. But John Hughes secretly met with 20th Century Fox before production began to ask whether the company would be willing to finance the project if Warner Brothers refused. According to executive producers Scott Rosenfeld, a copy of the script was secretly delivered to Fox, bypassing legal restriction. Fox not only liked the script, but also offered to add a couple $1 million on top. It got especially comical in the school building, where all the production departments were located. A representative of the Warners came into each office and said,
"The project is canceled."
And then the producer came in immediately after and reassured,
"Everything is fine. We are not closing."
Thus, production continued pretty much the same day. And so, on February 14th, 1990, filming officially began and lasted almost 2.5 months. You know the movie commandment, never work with children or animals? Well, it doesn't apply. Working with Macaulay Culkin on this movie was a pleasure for the team. He was truly a nice and talented guy. In addition, Chris Columbus sincerely loves, and most importantly knows, how to work with children on set. Culkin, in turn, constantly pulled something funny off and improvised. For example, in the scene with shaving cream, Culkin's scream was improvised. This impromptu was such a hit with the audience that the shot became the symbol of the franchise and was used all over the place, from posters to endless references to Edward Munch's The Scream. Finding a talented child who will listen to all the commands and who will be absolutely loved by the camera is one thing, but finding a truly charming guy who, even when he screams in frame, will be hilarious is a completely different thing. Culkin made this film possible, and therefore they didn't even try to find a child who could mimic Culkin's movements. It was impossible. So Macaulay Culkin was great, but Joe Pesci was very problematic. He was so used to acting in gang dramas that acting in comedies with children was very difficult for him. He remained a classic Scorsese character. Sometimes it seemed to him that the dialogues were very weak, not suitable for his status, and he obviously couldn't swear. One day, Pesci cursed right in front of a child. Chris Columbus took him aside and harshly scolded him, but Pesci found a solution. He came up with his own language. Thus, for a while, he overcame his bad habit, until now he saw that according to the schedule, he had to arrive on set by 7 a.m. Fun fact, Pesci is a big golf fan, and beginning every morning with 9 holes, and only after that he could function. Enraged, Pesci grabbed the second assistant director, who was in charge of scheduling, and dragged him by the collar to the producer's office to complain. Knowing that Pesci was a renowned actor, the producers compromised and moved his scenes to 9 a.m. instead of 7. Otherwise, Pesci took his comedic role seriously. Between takes, he avoided Culkin at all costs to try to keep the tension between them, and he was successful at that. Almost too successful. One time when they were rehearsing the scene where Kevin is hanging from a hook, Pesci actually bit his finger so hard that it left Macaulay with a scar. There was a certain protocol in place for working with children on set. For example, in the scene where Kevin is jumping on his parents' bed, the director had a few crew members lay on the floor and spot Culkin in case he fell while jumping. Or for example, when shooting a scene in which a boy is flipping through a Playboy magazine, Columbus had to make sure that the young actor wouldn't see naked pictures. Therefore, they added fake pages into the magazine, and the original ones were given to Joe Pesci. Culkin could only be on set for 5 hours a day and no later than 10 p.m., which made it impossible to shoot night scenes. Executive producer Tarkin Gotch shared how they invented ways to get around that rule, since they had no other options.
Macaulay Culkin wasn't paid an astronomical fee, because this was his breakout film. But, of course, all the money went to his parents. So, if we got to the end of the day, and we were very short on time, it was not unknown for his father to be bribed with money, and try to get a scene as quickly as possible.
Sometimes, the director had to resort to using a double, Larry Nicholas, who was 30 years old at the time. Pesci and Stern also needed doubles. There are no special effects or CGI in the movie. Everything the audience sees was done in real life. Even the tarantula on actor Daniel Stern's face was real, and in order to not scare it off, the actor just had to silently open his mouth. While all the gags, falls, and humiliations of the bandits look fun on screen, the crew literally couldn't watch all that being filmed.
Cut.
Oh my god. Is he dead?
All good. Going again?
The movie was shot and editing went smoothly. Chris was satisfied, everything was on time, everything except the soundtrack. And Chris got an idea. What if we ask Williams?
I don't remember how this happened. We got the rough cut of the movie to John Williams.
He loved it.
He loved the movie, and he agreed to score the movie.
And suddenly...
Despite his great achievements in cinema and diverse soundtracks, Home Alone became a real challenge for him. Writing music for an American Christmas movie was a completely new task. He had to both preserve the traditions of Christmas music, the ringing bells, the choir, the mood, and make the soundtrack original. The composer later shared that during his work, he was inspired by Pyotr Tchaikovsky and his music for The Nutcracker. The soundtrack Williams created was well-deservedly nominated for an Oscar. True genius. When the movie was ready for the premiere, the entire team and producers were convinced that this small, low-budget family film will only be in theaters over the Christmas period, and possibly pay off with VHS sales. After all, Home Alone could not compete with Rocky V, which was being actively advertised around the country. When it just came out, critics' reviews were ruthless. Home Alone was deemed a second-rate, tasteless comedy. The producers thought that if they managed to gross $8 million in the opening weekend, they'd consider it a success. But Home Alone grossed 17. It became #1 picture in the first week, then second, third, fourth, and so on for 2 months. The film stayed in theater for 12 weeks and stayed in the top 10 until June 1991. Grossing almost $500 million in revenue. Home Alone became the highest-grossing film of 1990 and was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records. What does Home Alone mean to me? It's a fundamental movie, a hymn of its time. No other movie could capture the spirit of 90s US better. The characters aren't romanticized, they don't seem cookie-cutter-like in the latter installments of the franchise. They're real, charming, sometimes rude, sometimes daring, but real. John Hughes created a perfect chain of events, from the father who originally accidentally threw out Kevin's ticket to the mastermind traps. To be fair, those things would have killed the bandits in real life. Anyway, all aforementioned details, the successful casting, attention to visual details, and good on-set relationships headed into a perfect festive movie, which we'll remember forever, and I believe no one will ever be able to recreate that. This movie was a risky spur of a moment, and we will never see anything alike. And I'm giving this movie a yes. No one ever expected this movie to be such a success, and definitely didn't expect it to be a milestone for the industry and launch careers for many people involved. For example, a simple editor, Raja Gosnell, had gone on to direct The Smurfs. You don't get a project that big every day. Although its quality is a conversation for another day, well, let's not ruin the mood and move on to Home Alone's inevitable sequel. Home Alone 2. In the wake of the success of Home Alone, they decided to turn it into a franchise. While Home Alone 2 Lost in New York was still authored by the Hughes-Columbus power duo, and maintained the spirit and style of the first film, winning over fans' hearts, subsequent installments are a pitiful sight. For the second movie, it was decided to follow a proven path. They took all the best parts from the original and amplified it. Bigger scope, more actors, more mischievous traps. More of everything. And it was the right decision. Even John Hughes, known for his ability to write quickly and efficiently, was not quite ready to start working on the sequel immediately after the original. So, as director Chris Columbus later admitted, the time constraint pushed them to make not so much of a sequel, but a remake of the original in another setting, forcing the boy Kevin to get lost in New York and once again fight the bandits. Home Alone 2 Lost in New York is the only sequel to the franchise to feature the same writer and director, and the same budget of $15 million. It quickly became evident why Columbus didn't agree to be part of a further sequel. He realized that in this cinematic universe, one movie was more than enough. Even the second one is essentially a far-fetched repetition. How on earth, after a crazy and obviously nerve-wracking experience for the mother and father in the first film, did they manage to leave the same child alone again? Guys, child protection should be on it. But all this does not negate the fact that this is a charming and no less funny movie, which lost just a bit of its coziness and intimacy compared to the original. Home Alone 2 is still able to cheer me up and create a festive mood, although the adults here have been dumbed down even further. I'm willing to forgive absolutely any rough edges for the appearance of Tim Curry. This guy made the film what it is. The main challenge of filming in New York wasn't the fact that the winter of 1991-1992 was one of the coldest, but the publicity of Culkin. Having become one of the most famous actors not only in America, but also all around the world, Macaulay had grown a huge fan base that always knew where he was and followed him. Fans got into frame, running into takes, and interfering with the overall workflow. Only Joe Pesci, who returned to play the hot-tempered burglar Harry, refused to babysit Culkin or treat him as a star. One day, the young actor worked up the courage to ask Pesci why he never smiled at him. Pesci reacted in his normal manner, made a scary face, and yelled, "Shut up." The boy never bothered him again. Pretty convenient. According to director Chris Columbus, Donald Trump, at the time the owner of the Plaza Hotel, allowed the crew to shoot scenes in the hotel lobby in exchange for a cameo in the film. Columbus planned to edit the scene out, but left it because the test audience responded well to Trump's appearance. The movie was the second best in terms of financial success in 1992 behind Aladdin, that grossed more than $173 million in the United States. The franchise became a big hit, Kevin's recorder turned into custom merch, and themed video games began to fill the shelves. Should we play one? Fun fact, during the making of the sequel, Hughes quickly wrote the script for Home Alone 3, where Kevin is a teenager but wants to spend Christmas without his parents and family. But the draft did not entice the studio. At the same time, Macaulay Culkin's mental state was gradually depleting. I would love to find the lost script of the original Home Alone 3. I'd give anything to read it. Well, almost anything. For the first Home Alone, Culkin received $100,000, and for the second, $4.5 million. Checks were mind-blowing for an 11-year-old child. Culkin, at the age of 11, became the second young celebrity ever to be invited to host Saturday Night Live. Every child in the Western world envied Culkin. That envy was only furthered when he befriended Michael Jackson and was starred in the music video for Black or White. It felt like the world was at his feet. The boy's success gave Kit, Macaulay's manager and father, a huge influence in Hollywood, since if you wanted to work with Macaulay, you had to go through his hot-tempered and impudent man. In 1993, Premiere Magazine named Kit Culkin the 48th most influential person in Hollywood, ahead of Michael Douglas and Eddie Murphy. Keith often took creative control of movies with Macaulay and pushed other siblings to participate in projects when they didn't want to. Macaulay Culkin, after being in 2 Home Alones, starred in a series of other successful films, including a coming-of-age drama, My Girl, a thriller, The Good Son, and a comedy, Richie Rich. The movies were almost as financially successful as Home Alone, but by 1994, little Culkin was simply burned out. In 7 years, he appeared in 15 films under the relentless onslaught of his father, whom Culkin himself described as a tyrant. He had a bright future ahead of him, but then came drugs, alcohol, and oblivion. However, these days, Culkin is once again being actively invited into interesting projects, whether it's a fashion show from Gucci or starring in American Horror Story. And even though Macaulay's Instagram has been abandoned for a year, we can always go to it or his Twitter page. Send him greetings from us. Support his new, exciting, and philanthropic projects and send him our respect. Just don't tease or focus on the role of Kevin McAllister. This guy is capable of so much more. I like the dynamic narrative in the sequel. I like the constant change of locations and the aesthetics of a big, noisy, hustling New York. I like the unrealistic traps, like the inflatable doll and the shower prank, which would be impossible to set up in 30 seconds. I like the exaggerated characters, and especially Carrie O'Hara. By the way, her and Macaulay had such a strong chemistry on set that Culkin still calls her mom during phone calls. And almost all the visual gags of the sequel make me smile even after the 20th rewatch. Well, maybe except for Marv's stupid jump into a huge hole in the floor, and him looking like a skeleton while electrocuted. Regardless, it was damn nice to once again be able to witness the mad genius of John Hughes. And despite all the contradictions, I love the sequel and will say yes to it. Home Alone 2 didn't break the box office record of the original, but that didn't stop Hughes' obsession with making a trilogy. Home Alone 3. Wanting to keep milking the franchise, the studio decided to go with a new approach for Home Alone 3, essentially rebooting the franchise with a new rising child star, Alex Linz. So, without Culkin. They began shooting Home Alone 3 in 1996 with a script by John Hughes. He was also the producer. Hughes was the only celebrity who made it to round 3. Culkin obviously did not take part. Home Alone 3 was the directional debut of the aforementioned Raja Gosnell, who edited the first 2 Home Alone films, and then shot Scooby-Doo and the Smurfs. Now the antagonists weren't petty bandits, but 4 international spies, who, due to a luggage mix-up, lost a stolen microchip hidden in an RC car. The car falls into the hands of 8-year-old Alex, who is home alone with chickenpox. Alex, like Kevin McAllister before him, sets up a bunch of traps to fend off thieves in his house. Basically the same concept. Of course, the third movie falls in comparison with the original, which makes their tagline even better than the first 2. Sound that much more annoying. The lead actor lacks Macaulay Culkin's charisma, and literally every single adult actor in this movie also lacks it. None of the 4 terrorists have any developed character traits, And let's be honest, an 8-year-old with chickenpox kicking 4 international spies' butts is completely insane. The movie lost the Christmas spirit, dynamics, Chris Columbus's charming storytelling. Everything became monotonous, boring, and bland. Maybe the only sort of nice thing is little Scarlett Johansson. Obviously, John Hughes was trying to put a new spin on the franchise, shifting the accents, circumstances, and characters. As a standalone product of that time, the movie can get away with a maybe, but no more than that. Home Alone 3 was unsuccessful compared to the previous installments, grossing $79 million with a budget of $32 million. The audience said Alex D. Linz was no Macaulay Culkin, and the guy's film career didn't really work out. Linz ended it in 2007. It was the last film in the Home Alone series to receive a theatrical release. It was followed by 2 directly-to-TV sequels, and the less we talk about them, the better. Home Alone 4. The rights to the franchise still belonged to 20th Century Fox, and the studio had every reason to hand it over to the TV department. The Home Alone concept was quite profitable, and in order to not lose any money in the box office, it was decided to downsize it to a TV release, bypassing John Hughes. All that was happening between 1997 and 2002. To be honest, a few people were interested in the franchise sequel 10 years after the original. The studio bet on people scrolling through channels, stumbling upon Part 4, and mistakenly thinking that the quadriquel is no worse than the previous installments. The screenwriters of this film had a problem. Since the days of Home Alone 3, the world had changed. They couldn't have a child character like Alex Pruitt on screen post 9/11. Children fighting terrorists was now taboo. There was only one thing left to do with the franchise: return it to its roots. Good news for everyone who hated Alex. In this movie, we see the McAllisters again. A little different, but these are the same McAllisters. They're straight from the stock photos. But something has changed. For example, their appearance. And also, they live in a different house. Yes, the same McAllisters that were once the paradigm of a healthy American family are now divorced. But don't worry about Kevin's father, because he has a new young girlfriend named Natalie. Peter and Natalie want the children to come visit for Christmas and meet their future stepmother. At the same time, they would be spending time with the royal family, who are paying Kevin's father a visit. But the fun began when Marv, whom we last saw in Home Alone 2 with his severe head injury, got stuck in the house trying to abduct the prince when he arrived. And Marv didn't come alone, but with his wife Vera. And you can all probably guess what happens next. The film was intended as a pilot for a series, therefore some actors even had in their contracts that they should be ready to return to the set. But low ratings crossed out this possibility. Thank God. By the way, the creators had the guts to contact Daniel Stern and invite him back for his role, but he read the script and politely declined. As you can imagine, this film was destroyed by critics and received low ratings and the wrath of fans of the original. This cheap excuse for a movie robbed us of the snow, the Christmas spirit, the creative traps, and the charming boy. Slight entertaining value comes from cringing at Marv and his wife Vera's antics. This movie is so bad, it's impressive. When I was a kid, I had my own DVD with this film on it. Every time I watched it, I tried my best to find advantages in this picture. But the attempts were in vain, and I will give this movie a no. It's hard to believe that somehow after all this, in 2012, Home Alone 5. As in Home Alone 3, there are no more McAllisters in this film. To sum up, 10-year-old Finn, his older sister Alexis, and their parents Curtis and Catherine move from California to Maine to a house which happens to store a lost painting by Edward Munch worth several millions of dollars. The trio of criminals decides to take advantage of the fact that the Baxters are clueless about their treasure. Hughes, Jessica, and Sinclair plan to rob the place. The 3 of them agree to break in while the family is at a Christmas party. However, only the parents end up going, leaving their children to fend off the bandits in the good old Home Alone spirit. Miraculously, this time, the channel at least tried a little. The budget has obviously been increased, and they even got Malcolm McDowell himself to appear as one of the robbers. Clockwork Orange, what are you doing here? In the 5th part, they pulled off some jokes that were sometimes clearly not intended for children. It seems to me that this time the creators decided to target an older demographic. But does this make up for the general vibe being off? Characters are now constantly referencing original movies, topped with an annoying main character. I'm giving them a no. God bless them. Home Alone 6? 4 years ago, director Dan Mazer received a call from his agent saying that Disney was thinking of making a sort of sequel, remake, soft reboot of Home Alone, and asked Dan to write a pitch for the script. He refused, thinking it's a terrible idea. For those who don't know, Mazer is the main inspirer behind Sacha Baron Cohen's films, hence Dan has a talent for writing comedies, but they are all far from being kid-friendly. In 2 years, Mazer received another call, but this time with a ready-made script and an offer to direct a picture for Disney+. Apparently, in addition to this, Disney added a couple mil to secure the deal, so that at least someone would finally make this film. Mazer argues with criticism of the reboot by saying that Marvel and DC have their own universes, so why can't Home Alone have one? Of course it can, but you can also write good scripts and not backwards nonsense where the boy has become a rich blockhead and the main villains or bandits are distressed spouses. And the movie is struggling to keep the audience entertained with physical violence against these people. The sixth film wants a cameo from Kevin McAllister, who was supposed to advertise a home protection system against thieves on TV. But even Culkin decided to stay away from the project. In fact, the only scene that reminds us of the original is the remake of Angels with Filthy Souls in Space, where the characters say the phrase,
"Garbage." I don't know why they're always trying to remake the classics.
This is a no set in stone. Chris Columbus called the remake a waste of time, but shared his fantasies about his Dream Part 3.
If I were to make one, I think my main character would be a 33-year-old Kevin McAllister, who inherits the house from his parents and his bright son. Harry and Marv would still want revenge and would go back to this house, this time to get Kevin's son.
This sounds more appropriate than what the actual reboot did. But dislikes, negative reviews, and low ratings obviously buried the franchise deep and for long. Finally, thank goodness. So, what is all this talk about the failed sequels for? The whole point is that these movies clearly show how the original Home Alone is an amazing and unique movie. The legacy of John Hughes will carry on for many years to come thanks to the incredible work done by the entire first crew, who were ready to do anything in their power to make the audience appreciate their story. And of course, the lucky winner, Chris Columbus, who went on to conquer the magical world of Harry Potter. Despite that Home Alone was the most commercially successful project of screenwriter John Hughes, the film did not become the epitome of his career. For example, in 1991, Curly Sue, scripted by him, was released. In 1996, 101 Dalmatians. In the late 90s, Hughes returned to his home state, Illinois, and completely cut off the press. He left the film industry and focused on farming. In 2009, at the age of 59, John Hughes died of a heart attack while taking a walk. And it was a real tragedy. The voice of the generation had passed. The voice of youth cinematography of the 80s and 90s, which strongly influenced the new generation of filmmakers, was lost. Even Spider-Man Homecoming constantly references The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and there are numerous examples like that. One thing is certain, John Hughes is a genius who made our childhood special. May he rest in peace. For me personally, Home Alone is a symbol of Christmas. Believe it or not, for the past 15 years, my childhood friend and I have met every Christmas, ordered a cheese pizza, and rewatched the first or second film. This is already a tradition, a kind of ritual. Without this ritual, Christmas doesn't feel right for us. And I think in these trying times, traditions are more important than ever. Like, for example, another one of my Christmas traditions of encouraging people to do good. Many people need a holiday miracle more than ever, and I think it's extremely important to donate any amount you can to the foundations that support orphanages, nursing homes, and hospices. Links to verified charities are in the description. And Merry Christmas, dear friends. This year was incredibly important, and I hope the team and I will surprise you again next year. Thank you for being with us. Big love and hugs. Let's do good things.
Daniel, come here.
Daniel!
Jingle them bells and frolic. Oh, by gosh, some stolly. Eggnog, gin and tonic make Yuletide gay and jolly. Same procedure every year. I just can't get enough. I drink till Rudolph reappears. I told